guys, this is Nadia Andreeva from spinachandyoga.com, and today we have another interview in the series of Happy Belly interviews that I'm doing to celebrate the launch of my book, Happy Belly Women's Guide to Feeling Vibrant, Light, and Balanced. And today I have a friend and an amazing expert in emotional eating, Isabel Foxen. And Isabel helps women to stop being crazy about food and weight, which I think most women are, at least to some degree.
I'd say that's
She's
fair.
a certified health coach and emotional eating expert. She teaches women how to make choices around food effortlessly without obsessing, counting every calorie, or binge eating in the middle of the night. I guess in the middle of the day counts as well.
Yeah. Anytime you're doing it while hiding.
Yes. She knows that all women can have the lives they dream about, the ones that they think they'll get once they're thin enough. And Isabel writes a lot for Huffington Post and other websites. She's been featured in a lot of websites all over the internet. And she also has her own website, which is isabelfoxenduke.com. And it's going to be posted right below the video. So you can, guys, check it out and download her free guide, How Not to Eat Chocolate Cake. Mm-hmm. Or maybe how to eat it and enjoy it.
Right. Well, yeah, I think it's funny. The original title, which is usually too long to include in a bio, is How to Not Eat Chocolate Cake Really Fast Standing Up When Nobody's Looking.
Okay.
So it's really about the not eating chocolate cake with sort of the shame and the guilt associated with it that usually ends up making us want to eat 10 times more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I love that. And I love what you're doing. And I'm really excited to share with people some of the insights that you got from working with your clients, and particularly how we can bring it into the area of improving digestion, which emotional eating affects it to such a huge extent.
Huge.
So what does a happy belly mean for you?
So, I mean, there's kind of two components to it. So in sort of the broader scheme of things, just getting to a point where we're listening to our bodies and making choices around food based on our natural biological hunger and fullness and sort of, general biological cues and feelings within our own physical bodies is obviously, for clear reasons, very different than making food choices from an emotional or mental place, which would include both emotional eating and binge eating and compulsive overeating, and also excessive dieting, where you're, denying what your body wants and not listening to your body's cues around hunger. Both of those things can, in my experience, really screws around with your digestion. You are actively fighting your body's digestive needs and desires and wants. Your body wants to eat when it wants to eat, and it wants to stop eating when it wants to stop eating. And when your mind gets involved, you have a huge digestive problem on your hands. Like that in and of itself will create massive problems for your digestion. I mean, all of my clients come to me and they're constantly complaining about bloating, constipation, all sorts of other issues that are created not necessarily even by what they're eating. A lot of these people are eating very, very carefully and healthfully. They're just eating quantities that are either too little or too much or just completely, out of touch.
I'm so with you on this one. I think we put way too much attention into what we eat instead of how we eat it. Because yes, you can eat the healthiest food, but without chewing it while sitting in front of the computer. And yes, you will feel bloated after this.
Yeah, exactly. People forget about chewing. And I'm like, seriously? Like that is the first phase of our digestive process.
Yeah.
Chewing is actually, if you ask any doctor in the United States, I learned in 9th grade health class that chewing is the first stage of our digestive system.
Especially when it comes to carbs.
Mm-hmm, right? Saliva, super important. Like, got to mix that stuff up. So, so this is a really, really big deal. And obviously, chronic dieters and most emotional eaters are chronic dieters. So I'm going to just put chronic dieters, emotional eaters, binge eaters. They all kind of go together in one group. Most people who are doing one are doing the other, or some combination in some sort of quantities. Basically, we'll call them mind eaters, right? Like people who are eating with their brains instead of with their stomachs. Yeah. Yeah. That sort of demographic generally is not slowing down and enjoying their food, right? Like they're eating in a state of like deprivation or urgency, or, like wolfing down what's on their plate, terrified that they may not ever be able to see that type of food ever again, so they're not chewing usually, like they're usually the people who are saying, oh, I'm always the first one done at the table. So yeah, really creates a lot of physical symptoms as well as obviously emotional and mental distress.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about mind eaters, because out of a lot of women that I talk to on a daily basis, many women are completely disconnected from their physical hunger. So when you ask them to rate their hunger, they have no clue. And that's the first sign that we rely on our mind. So thanks for the term.
Yeah, mind eating. It's an epidemic.
Yeah. So why do you think it is important to do what we can to go back into a nourished, kind of comfortable way of digesting food?
So how can we do
Why?
that?
Why?
Why? I mean, I know for me, what's interesting is as I often talk about sort of the mental and emotions of this, I also had to make choices around food based on my digestive health. And ultimately, recovering from chronic dieting, emotional eating, mind eating, if you will, it really boils down to, do we want to take care of ourselves or do we not? And I'm not sure. I think this sort of overemphasis on what we're eating all the time versus how we're eating is sort of a manifestation of this myth that we're telling ourselves, that we're taking care of ourselves by making the right choices, but we're not really taking care of ourselves. We're not really sitting down and nourishing ourselves. We're not really treating ourselves like the young children that we really are inside. We're not taking care of ourselves the way we would our young daughter or our grandparents. There's no care in that. It's more fear, and we're just running around making choices like saying, oh, I can't eat that, I can only eat that. That's fear-based. That's not caring. So for me, I think about my food choices today, and I know I want to make choices, either what the food is or how I eat it, based on wanting to care for myself and nourish myself and nurture myself, rather than this like fear-based, I suck if I don't do this thing.
So it's based more out of self-love, self-compassion versus fear of either blowing up or not following the guidelines.
Exactly. I see fear, obvious fear around is huge and epidemic proportions, not going away anytime soon. But also there's a lot of fear of almost like an obsessive fear about healthism. I didn't coin that term. But there's almost like an obsessive fear of like, oh my God, if I eat that bite of cheese, I will spontaneously get cancer tomorrow, that kind of thing. And I think that also is creating a lot of problems in our, I guess, industry, if you want to call that, or in sort of the health blog world. And that's something that I call a lot of attention to, because it can become obsessive, and it can become, again, it's not based in wanting to care for ourselves and nourish ourselves. It's based in this like hyper need to control the outcomes of our lives, which are inherently a lot less controllable than we would like to think.
That's so true. And I think that fear that you're mentioning can also show up in I guess from time to time, we can all crave something that's not on the menu of a healthy, defined nutritionist guideline. And what I see women end up doing is they first eat their plate of greens, their salad, their chicken breast, and then they go for food that their body is asking for. So as a result, they're overeating. So it's more of a fear of not getting enough.
Right. It goes both. Like a fear of falling outside of the guidelines, but then simultaneously, as a reaction to the guidelines, right, as a reaction to feeling like we're in a box, we fear deprivation, right?
Yeah.
Like we fear like, oh my gosh, will I ever be able to have a cookie ever again? It's not really human nature to want to be so constrained and restricted. It triggers us into sort of like a deprivation survival mentality.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, we're trapped between a rock and a hard place where it's like every time we go on a restrictive diet, for instance, we feel trapped in the sense of like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be able to eat that thing that I really love that reminds me of my grandmother ever again? But then also simultaneously this fear of, well, if I eat that thing, all hell will break loose and I will gain 300 pounds and get cancer spontaneously. So like, it's women are kind of, a lot of women feel trapped in this kind of double-edged sword with food, which creates this just misery. I mean, food is the last thing we should feel so constrained with and feel so tense about.
Right.
It's such a like nourishing, life supporting thing.
That's really cool. So let's get a little bit personal.
Yeah.
What do you do day to day to keep your belly happy?
So, I think that the number one things are the basic things that I've been kind of introducing so far, which is I really, really, really just listen to my body and what my body wants. That is a practice that I have developed over years, right? It takes time to develop learning what our bodies want.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned a lot of women probably come to you, and they certainly come to me having no idea. They haven't even thought about it. They don't even remember what hunger feels like or fullness feels like. They're not even sure. So practicing really listening to what my body wants is something that I do on a regular basis, and that really keeps me physically well. I mean, my body knows what it wants, and generally it wants foods that are life-supporting and healthful for it. If I'm, constantly wanting something that isn't life supporting, I know that that's emotional and that something else is going on. So that's number one. That's sort of the basics. Also, really making space for myself with my meals and really allowing myself to enjoy food. So something that's talked about a lot is this concept of mindful eating, which is really paying attention to your food and, slowing down and tasting your food and chewing your food, which is a really, really, really important concept. I think sometimes it gets a little bit of a bad rap in the sense of when we talk about mindful eating, sometimes it sounds boring.
Yeah.
And really, it's not about like, okay, it shouldn't be another should. It's not about sitting down and closing my eyes and trying to chew my food 100 times. I think that's like a macrobiotic thing, like chewing your food 100 times. I don't know. But,
develop really strong jaws.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Like for me, I don't have a practice where I sit down and force myself to be mindful. I would never do that. I couldn't do that. I'm really bad at shoulds. Like the second you put a should in front of me, I run away. Mm-hmm. But I just think about it like I make a practice of enjoying my food and making food something that I look forward to and have fun with. Right? Like I choose foods that are delicious. I enjoy preparing them or even picking them out if I'm not preparing them myself. And I choose exactly what I want. And I give myself a really decadent, luxurious experience. I think especially with emotional eating, so many people are eating emotionally because they just want to break.
Yeah.
And they just want to relax. Yet eating for them is like this really stressful experience where they're like sitting over their plate, like rushing through it, like trying to get it over with as fast as possible. And it's like, why don't we actually take the opportunity to relax when we're eating and really give ourselves a meal and give ourselves a luxurious, decadent experience? I think that is a double whammy of benefits. It allows us to have fun. It allows us to, experience pleasure and give ourselves a break and really nourish ourselves on an emotional level. Like food has a very important emotional place in our lives. It is emotional to eat, and that's something to celebrate, to really enjoy food the way we enjoy other biological necessities like sex.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, in doing so, by simply just focusing on how wonderful food is and, expressing gratitude for food and enjoying it and really feeling sensual when we eat and giving ourselves an experience and putting on candles if that works for you, in doing that, we eat mindfully without eating mindfully,
Yeah.
without forcing it or without doing something.
So here I have a natural question that I think a lot of women will have when they're listening to the interview. We know the theory, like I'm supposed to enjoy food, but
Hmm.
if for some reason it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And I think that's a matter of changing a behavior, right? Forming a new habit, making it a new normal. Like my new normal is to pay attention to how I feel when I eat. How did you form that habit for yourself in the beginning?
So, I mean, again, I think a lot of it is like making it really fun and making it something that you look forward to. I do think that there's something to be said for life happens. We're all really busy. Sometimes we can't sit down and have these, really pleasurable meals. Like I certainly have meals sometimes where I'm just eating it quickly and getting to my next meeting because that's just what I have to do. And that's fine. That's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I I'm just excited about my meals, not in the way of, oh, I'm so excited to eat this thing that because I've been obsessing about it all day and I can't stop thinking about it, but like, oh, I get a break now. Like I get to sit down and give myself 20, 30 minutes to sit down and eat some beautifully prepared food, whether I prepared it or someone else prepared it for me. So, for me, that really was the key, is just focusing on pleasure and making it enjoyable. It's like when they say, if you don't enjoy your workouts, you're not going to do them. If you're not enjoying your meals, you're not going to do them. Like make it kind of sexy, like make it fun. That's really, I feel like for me, that was sort of the key. And again, know that you won't be able to do that perfectly. Like there will be
Yeah.
busy days and we're all, many of us have jobs and kids and all sorts of things that get in the way of us being able to take maybe a 30-minute break in the middle of the day. But for the most part, if we can make that time available or if that time is afforded to us, it shouldn't feel like a chore to eat mindfully. That's sort of the big point here, is that it's mindfulness is a product of really giving ourselves a gift of enjoying something deeply. On a side note, also, I think another reason why women don't enjoy their food is because they're making foods that they don't like and that they're making foods that are effing boring. And,
Okay.
and like, that's not going to work either. Like, if you're trying to pleasurably eat like brown rice and tofu all day and like never giving yourself like the experience of like having something that's like really delicious that you want, you're not going to enjoy it. Like, if it tastes like cardboard, you're not going to enjoy it. So, like, this only works if you actually like what you're eating and are actually giving yourself the pleasure of eating what you want. And again, eating what you want does not necessarily have to mean that you're eating like pizza and Cheetos all day. Like, I have a feeling if you actually gave yourself permission to eat certain things, you may want to eat quote unquote healthful foods that were also delicious. But that's another really big thing. I think that a lot of women who are, not enjoying their foods or finding it difficult to enjoy their foods are doing so because their food sucks.
Yeah. And I think on the other opposite note, I think a lot of women eat food that they supposedly like based on the old memories or emotions, not the actual taste. So if they eat it mindfully, the likelihood of them liking it is not that high, actually.
Yeah, that's true too.
But talking about foods that actually do taste good and make you feel good, what are some of your favorite foods that make your belly happy?
So, I mean, I am a big fan of things like stir fries. I'm like a young 20 something busy professional and I'm not the best cook in the world. So I really like to just throw things on anything that's stovetop cooked, I'm into. I also use a lot of nut butters and I'm a really big fan of nuts. That's something that works for me. And things like tamari, I use a lot of like gluten-free soy sauce. I'm big into sauces. Sauces are my jam. Making my own sauces that I know work for me that are also going to make my food delicious is great.
Okay.
So I would say that that's probably, that's sort of my kitchen tip is sauces for sure. But I also, I eat out a lot, unfortunately. I probably shouldn't eat out as much as I do, but it happens. And I'm not the most patient cook in the world. And I love things like sushi and, just, really anything that sounds good to me that I know isn't going to have an adverse effect on my body. And generally speaking, things that have adverse effects on my body are not even things that I physically crave, because I'm at this point so connected with my body that when I think about them, I can like feel a reaction. Like I can feel like myself, being like, ouch, that's going to hurt if I eat that. It's not a temptation, which is a really, really big, critical, important, like it's an important distinction to make too, is that when we're truly allowing ourselves to eat what we want and really giving ourselves to permission to eat foods, even the like quote unquote bad foods, eventually what you do is you're scraping away all the shame and noise and mind stuff so that your body can actually start to give you unbiased information. And people are usually shocked at how quickly into intuitive eating or allowance-based eating or normal eating that they start to want foods that are life-supporting and, helpful for them and make them feel good. Like a quote-unquote normal eater who's never had a diet history does not eat foods that are allergic to them on a regular basis. They do not feel tempted to do that.
Yeah. I think it's a perfect point of creating that mental food map of this food feels good, this food doesn't feel good. And that's how we get disconnected a little bit from that external wisdom of people telling us, eat this, don't eat that, and create our internal food map.
Totally. It's so different to think about food in the context of what feels good than the context of what I should or should not be eating.
Yeah.
It's like night and day.
Was your belly always happy? Was it always easy to keep your belly happy?
No. Well, so, God, I was going to say, I very rarely talk about my digestive issues because they're like kind of gross. But when like for most of my life, I always felt like I had a really iron stomach and I could handle things. I didn't feel a lot of pain, but I have a lot of family history of colon issues, colon cancer, IBS, all sorts of stuff. I was prone to some issues that maybe I won't even say on camera that I didn't really think were even issues at the time. Mm-hmm. But when I was going to talk to my doctor, I never even thought once about them. I was never uncomfortable. But in talking to a holistic doctor, an integrative doctor, when I was experiencing other completely non-related symptoms like canker sores or anxiety or, like stuff like that, somebody suggested to me, based on your family history and what's going on with you, and sort of these more mild symptoms, have you ever thought about taking out gluten? Like, have you ever considered that? And I had never really considered it before. This was a few years ago. But I said, what the hell, why not? I'll give it a try. I'll do the elimination diet thing and just give it 30 days and see what happens. My symptoms were there and it kind of made me think like, okay, this is maybe a thing, but my personal symptoms weren't bad enough yet that I would have done it had I not had a family history of other illnesses that kind of like scared me a little bit. Like, ooh, like maybe if this is real, I should take care of it now rather than waiting until it gets really bad. So I did the elimination diet. And I reintroduced gluten after 30 days and I got real sick, really, really sick. And that was sort of the end of gluten for me, unfortunately. But it's interesting because, I had come from this sort of really dysfunctional history with food where I had, never been able, I was like never able to cut something out of my diet without binging on it. Right? Like every time I would like constantly be going on these diets when I was younger and constantly falling off the diets and, kind of on this diet binge cycle for years. And I remember thinking to myself like, oh gosh, if I like cut out gluten, am I going to like binge on bread, But what ended up happening was I have no interest in bread. Like it's like I like see it and I feel pain. It is, I'm so clear that is not, I legitimately do not want it. Because I know when I eat it, I'm going to get physically ill. And I think that what's really important about this story, because I work with a lot of women who are allergic to foods and end up binging on the foods that they're allergic to, is that, and they'll say, like, I know it always makes me sick, but I keep binging on it anyway. And the thing is if shame is in the picture, right? If you have judgment around what you're doing, it clouds your body's ability to make decisions, right? It like changes that whole do you want it or do you not want it sort of thing. By definition, if you're feeling shame and judgment about a choice, like you should do it, like your self-esteem is on the line, like your ability to feel good about yourself when you wake up in the morning is based on whether or not you are able to abstain from such and such food. If that's the mentality you're bringing to it, you are going to probably binge eat or eat emotionally those foods, because you're putting yourself in the box that humans don't want to be. Humans don't want to be in the box of I can't, I'm bad. If I do that, all hell will break loose. So, another way of thinking about it is, and I often tell the stories to my clients, I am allowed to eat gluten. Like Isabel Foxen Duke is allowed to eat gluten. I can have gluten if I want, but the consequences of me eating gluten will be that I will get sick and my stomach will hurt and it will be unpleasant. And that's a very different mindset than, oh my God, I can't eat gluten, or I'm a bad person because all hell will break loose and this is the worst thing ever. Mm-hmm. Like, it's actually not the worst thing ever. Like, if I ate gluten, I'd get sick for a day and that would suck, but it wouldn't be the worst thing ever. Worse things have happened. Yeah. And just by that, having that mentality shift makes a huge, huge difference in that sort of feeling like you're in a box thing, right? Like, I'm not in a box with gluten. I just don't want to eat gluten because it makes me sick. I could have it if I wanted to, but I just don't want to.
I love this shift. So you're choosing not to eat something, not because somebody told you, but because of self-respect, self-compassion, and love towards your body, and because you want to feel good. Not because you're afraid to break somebody's rule.
Exactly. My self-esteem is not on the line.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's the best advice you can give somebody who's trying to change their diet or eliminate one of the foods.
Totally.
What would advice, besides this one, besides reframing things and doing things for yourself, to feel good for your body, if there's any other advice that you would give somebody who is just at the beginning of their journey of finding what works for their body, what doesn't, how to listen to their body, how to maybe eat without the computer and the cell phone?
Yeah. I mean, so again, reincorporating pleasure and sort of like making time for meals and just enjoying foods, make it sexy, choosing foods you want is key. But also for, different people are on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to how far gone they are, or sort of, that sounds bad, how far away they are from knowing their hunger signals. So some people who are watching this may be like, I think I know when I'm hungry and I like pretty much know when I'm full. Maybe my issue is that I just don't really know what I want to eat. Other people are going to be like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. I haven't made a hunger-based decision around food ever. So depending on where you are, you're going to want to kind of take, I think, different first steps. People use all sorts of things to determine, to learn more about their bodies. Some people can't make hunger-based decisions right away, so they just continue to eat the way that they're eating and use a hunger scale in the beginning to kind of like get a gauge and just start to identify how foods make them feel without screwing around with their food first, right? Like, before you start making changes to your food, just start to notice how the foods you're already eating make you feel. That can be a really productive step one.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can adjust accordingly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I love this first step. First, before making any decisions, pay attention to your body and how you actually feel without judgment, whether
Yeah,
it's good or bad.
totally. The non-judgment is the key.
Yeah.
Key.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. You observe and it's like an experiment and you make conclusion based on the feedback that you get.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, Isabel, it was a great interview. You shared lots of wonderful things. Um, so, guys, if you want to share the video, please share with all your friends. Also, make sure to download a free chapter from my Happy Belly guide right underneath the video if you haven't done so, if you haven't gotten the book yet. And also, Isabel, if people want to know more about your work, to work with you, where can they find you? And like your website, other websites where you write?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is my website, which is, I guess, going to be below in the notes, but it's isabelfoxenduke.com, ISABELFOXENDUKE. And my guide, I have a guide called How to Not Eat Chocolate Cake, really fast standing up when nobody's looking, is a really great intro guide to kind of getting over this diet binge cycle, like madman phase in our head. And emotional eating, sort of guide to overcoming emotional eating. That's sort of the best place to start. And also my blog, my blog right there on the website has tons of information about what I'm talking about, both on the intuitive eating side, emotional eating side, body image side. There's lots of good information, which is, kind of all revolving around my personal take on how to actually overcome dysfunctional relationship with food once and for all.
That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Isabel, for being with us today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.